Yeah, we'd like to bring out Chris now. Chris, writer for The Mantle and a good friend. He's going to come out and talk to us right now. Chris, how you doing, man? Cool. Woo, Chris.
That's mantlethought.org.
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 Yeah, cool. What's up, man? How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. How do these headphones look?
They look really good, yeah. And the super benefit of having these now, this is our first episode with headphones, so we should tell everybody about that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Before, there would be parts where people like, so the other day, what's really important is the thing that I was,
Here's mostly at the most poignant parts. Like when you're really making a point and you're just kind of leaning over your mic.
Yeah, right.
The most important
you just
thing.
get away from it.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think that's ever
how do you think
happened on
these
the show
headphones are going to look with togas, though? I was hoping the toga thing would be today, though.
Yeah. That's an interesting
that is
icon.
interesting.
I like that as an icon, as an image, like toga, headphones.
Yeah.
Are we missing?
That's a good image.
Sandals or maybe like a giant ship or something? We missing something from that, but.
Well, I'm happy to be back on the Sulphurbath.
Cool, yeah, cool, man. I'm glad you're joining us
I make
again.
the final cut.
Right? No, I'm glad you're joining us again. Our first conversation I thought was really cool when you and Sean joined us and we talked about Egypt.
So last week we talked about Egypt,
Mhm.
and today we're going to talk about Greece.
Yeah.
And apparently I have a lot of opinions on places I've never been.
Right. Who doesn't?
Well, yeah.
But I take you as quite an authority, actually, because I know you do your research, and I know through your networks and just you and different people that have been here talking to me, you've always enlightened me and given me not only the story of what's going on, but you've always given me that backup of like, oh, go check out this article or whatever. And so there's always this backup of where that information comes off and citing sources and stuff. So, but you're writing now for The Mantle,
right?
And you just had an article published today, right?
Just published an article today.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story about Kostas Sakis, who's an anarchist in Greece, and he had been on hunger strike since June 4th. And yesterday, prison doctors determined that he was near the end of his life. And he had been on the hunger strike for over a month, and he was coming up at the end. And the reason he was hunger striking, I'll tell you, is that he had been held for 31 months without trial in prison in Greece. And there's lots of legal technicalities that we won't spend a whole lot of time getting into, but much of the detention was illegal. It was contrary to Greek law and contrary to European law. And in an effort to get the courts to recognize his situation and get the wider world to recognize his situation, Sakis started a hunger strike on June 4th. And yesterday, I was not sure if I was going to write a story about how he had tragically died and what the ramifications of that were going to be, or what actually thankfully ended up happening was that he was granted a 30,000 euro bail, and so he was thankfully released from prison for the time being, and he'll be able to have a sandwich. And
so the 30,000 bail, that's a huge amount, right? So
a huge amount.
Is that in accord with what the courts had stated as law? Or was that also kind of in violation of his rights? Or
the situation is that he was arrested in April 2010, and he was arrested leaving a warehouse in an Athens warehouse district that was used to store firearms, bombs, this kind of stuff for anarchist violence. And he's been very upfront about this from the beginning. He never denied that he was associated with this place. That he never denied his political leanings. In fact, he's always been very upfront about this. But, he was arrested in 2010, and he was remanded to a prison, awaiting trial, ostensibly. And in, it was February 2011, right? So nearly a year after he's been, initially arrested, he was then charged again with a new crime. And he was charged with being a member of the Conspiracy of Fire Cells, which is a violent anarchist organization in Greece, and it's illegal to be a member, and so. And
sorry to interrupt you. When you say violent anarchist organization in Greece, you mean violence carried out against the state, or
right?
What are they?
Sure. I mean, they do participate in bombings of bank branches, arson of official cars, but they're also in Greece right now, you have a political situation where there's violence on both sides of the spectrum. So on the far left, there's violence that's being exacerbated by the debt crisis, and on the far right, there's violence that's being created ultimately because of the debt crisis. So the Golden Dawn, the far-right neo-Nazi party in Greece, which is, getting a lot of people that are, buying into its program because, in times of economic deprivation, people tend to latch on to some more radical ideologies.
Right.
And so political violence isn't a new thing in Greece. It's not, isolated to the left. It runs the spectrum, and it actually has, something of a history in Greece. Violent political parties. But so back to Sakis, he was, he was then charged again with being a member of this organization, and he was remanded again for an additional amount of time on this new charge. Now, in Greek law, you can only hold a person for 18 months on a single charge without trial, right? And in some extraordinary cases, it could be extended to 30. But in those, what are we talking about? We're talking about terrorists, ostensibly. But he was remanded on the second charge, and as he neared his 18 months on the second charge, right? So it's now nearly, it's been 28 months nearby, right? He was then charged again with being a member of the conspiracy of fire cells and having participated in fire bombings, right?
And what was that charge about? Did they have evidence against him on that?
They didn't have any evidence against him. In fact, the conspiracy of fire cells, for what it's worth, came out and disavowed that he had ever been a member of their organization.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And he was very upfront about the fact that sure, he was an anarchist and he participated in political violence, but he wasn't a member of this group.
But yeah, it's like you're pegging me to the wrong thing.
Right.
You're not
pegging
even
him to the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was ultimately, remanded again, though, for being a member. And that's a violation of Greek law. Greek law says that you cannot, break a single charge up into pieces, so to be able to remand a person longer.
Which the second charge would have been the first part of that, and then they're breaking us off as fire bombings associated with being a member.
Exactly. And interestingly, apparently Greece had something of a history of doing just that. Because in 1996, the European Convention on Human Rights, I believe, mandated or dictated in some way as contingency of Greece further entrance into the Eurozone, that it was going to have to stop this practice. And there's a law that's specially designed to prevent, breaking up charges in an effort to hold people in pretrial detention longer than 18 months. Mm-hmm. And so not only was this detention in violation of Greek law, but it was also in violation of European Union conventions. And what really struck me about the whole situation is that in Greece, as I think most people are aware at this point in time, we have a situation of forced austerity where the Greek state is being forced to pay back a tremendous amount of debt, right? Because it was in violation of certain European Union economic conventions, right? And so what you see is that you see the EU enforcing its economic conventions with an iron fist. And you see the consequences in Greece and Italy and Spain and Portugal of rising unemployment, of slashed social welfare benefits, hunger, homelessness, this kind of thing. But when it comes to human rights issues in precisely these countries that are at issue, Greece in this particular situation, the European Union is willing to turn a blind eye. To really, as long as they're getting their money, everything's fine. No matter what you have to do to make sure that we continue to get it. And if it means, a little bit of authoritarianism. I'm having a tough time with that word tonight. Yes. If it means that at home, then, so be it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, so again, it's business interests versus kind of like what's actually best for the people as citizens, and talking about economy and joblessness versus weighing in on corporate interests.
Yeah. I mean, it's about, doing what's legal, and then doing what's right.
Right.
And in Greece, you have it happening on both sides. You have, a immoral situation with the fact of this forced austerity. That's a moral wrong of what's happening to that country and to those people. And then you have, this fudging of legalism that happens, when society is beginning to fray at the threads. You just don't have the rule of law enforced anymore. So,
and then that's a fairly fundamental problem.
It's a fairly
because if we're not going to take care of the policies that govern what we're told is going to keep everything together,
right.
What should then happen?
Well, you see it happening around the world, really. That when law and right come up against economic numbers, right? That the numbers win. That when things are calculable, it's easy to make sure it gets done. But when it's a matter of enforcing right, then there's a lot of gray area.
If I can ask, and it might be kind of a naive question, but the microcosm talking about Colas, is it Colas? Sakis, sorry, Colas, Sakis, right? The microcosm of talking about him and Greece in general, like it might be kind of a naive question, but what do you think is the best outcome right now regarding their presence in the EU and possibly being able to bounce back somehow with or without the help of international funding and the IMF? And
they have a long road ahead of them either way.
Mm-hmm.
There's no light at the end of the tunnel as it stands right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question about if the benefits of staying in the Eurozone outweigh the consequences of leaving. And, a lot of that question revolves around agency. I mean, as it stands right now, Greece is in a position of subjugation to the European Union, who, are the paymasters in this situation. They're dependent on European Union bailout money to keep their economy running, such as it is. If they were to leave the euro and return to the drachma, their old currency, there'd be an immediate devaluation that would be it would be tragic. It would devastate the country. It's an already devastated country, though. But
also equally across the country to some extent.
What's that?
So that the hit would be sort of the same for everybody?
No, the hit's never the same for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The hit always hits the poor.
Yeah,
I mean, the bankers and the people who have their money in Switzerland and wherever the hell else they keep it, right? They're going to be able to play the currency game and get all their money situated. But sure, the people in Greece that have, euros right now, what little money that they have,
right,
they're going to see their wealth wiped away. But at that point in time, you could begin to manage your own monetary policy. And so that's what happened, what we saw in Iceland. Iceland had a banking crisis in 2008, and they were, not yet full members of the European Union, but they were on the road. And when they saw what was going to have to happen in Iceland for them to continue to be part of the European community, they left. And there was an immediate devaluation of the currency, but they're on the road back. And it's not like it is now for Greece, where you have 30 years into the future mandated austerity already in place.
Right.
And it can't be any other way as long as there's these, European Union economic standards that have to be met, as were they to be members of the European Union. So right now in Greece, you have a parliament that's dominated by, center-right parties, and you have three major parties in Greece right now. You have New Democracy, which is a center-right party, and they hold the majority in parliament, and their leader is the prime minister. You have PASOK, which is a socialist party, and which was in power it was in power in 2008. It was in power up until just last year, and so it bears a lot of responsibility for the situation that the Greek economy is in. And then you have Syriza, this is the coalition of the radical left on the far left. And Syriza was, up until elections last year, a minor party, a blip on the screen. But
things change.
Things change. The other way that things change is that you also have Golden Dawn, this radical right-wing neo-Nazi party that has 18 seats in parliament. It's not just, it's not just an idea. It's not just on the streets. It's not just an idea. I mean, they have legislative power, and they also have the ear of New Democracy, the ruling party. So elections are coming up, and we could see a shift. If Syriza gets a few more seats in the next election, they're going to be able to form a coalition, and they're going to take the reins. And at that point in time, I think, and I expect to see a serious conversation about Greece staying in the zone.
Yeah.
And, you see it across Europe. You see it in Greece, in Italy, Portugal, Spain, and, France and Ireland and all these places that, for a lot of people, a lot of citizens of these countries at least, the value of continuing to be a European Union member is not paying off. It's being outweighed by the social costs.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how much do you think this is an example for other nations that will? How much do you think this is an example that other nations will take to heart of the fears and the warnings about the globalism and new economic zoning and stuff like that?
Well, I think it's something that people should take to heart, but each situation is different. So I don't know, for instance, if we want to speculate and say, we have, for instance, Latin American, trading cooperative agreements such as they do in the European Union. Not the same, quite the same thing, but each situation is different. I think what the lesson will be if Greece leaves the euro, though, you'll see other countries leave almost right away. I mean, once one goes,
right,
they're all going to go, and it certainly remains to be seen how that's going to play out. As far as kind of like global, large, these kind of global communities that the European Union was supposed to be this kind of new brand of governance, and
right.
Folks like Kostas Sakis, and other anarchists in Greece and in other places in Southern Europe, they never bought into that. They always thought that this was a bad idea, that this was going to work out badly. And so there's people out there on the streets who are beginning to already work on the new reality of when this no longer exists. And what I mean by that is, especially in Greece, which is what we're talking about, the anarchists have had a long time presence. And with the cut in social programs that's happened, and with garbage on the streets, and with soup kitchens opening up, it's the anarchists and a lot of these far left parties that are taking up a lot of the slack over there. They're feeding people, they're cleaning up neighborhoods, they're doing these kind of social welfare things that the state isn't able to do anymore.
Right.
We also see that on the far right, and that's there's a battle there because people are already living without the state. The state's
right.
minimal presence in their lives.
And just an establishment like that in itself could be something of not only an experiment ground to see how do people cope with this, but as an example for other nations to see, like, it's not like it's only this one option, that people do come together. I mean, what I'm hearing is actually kind of a little bit hopeful, right? I mean, you still have the split and the argument in both sides, but in general, people will come together and keep the fabric of society together, even though they're still arguing, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that's a lesson for nations. I think that's a lesson for people.
Right.
It's a lesson. It's a lesson for organizers, and it's a lesson for groups that are working within their communities to take over some of these.
It's an individual lesson, that you have the power to do something to somebody near you, but globally, that's a different idea.
It should be a warning that these services that we depend on are can disappear overnight.
Yeah,
right.
Quite frankly,
and things will change if that happens, and we might not know what the impact is on our daily life, and we'll probably if that were to happen to us, I'm sure we'd have a much better insight on it, obviously, but we probably have a much harder time.
One thing I always wonder is how come there's not more of like a backup plan or something placed by government to us here in the United States of like admitting, like, what if this does fails? Like, we don't know what to do. Same thing makes me wonder, like, how come the major world leaders don't actually stand up and preach peace? It's all like policy. It's like, why don't they inform us of more practicalities and get pragmatic? Or are we just that? Are we just that?
Well, quite frankly, I think that if you empowered the citizens to do too much of it themselves, then the state becomes relatively becomes irrelevant.
Yeah.
A lot of people's lives, and although I think that's fantastic, I think that the bureaucrats probably don't.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of salaries that depend on this shit.
But even the avenues of how to do that, it's I think really enabling just to talk about certain specific things like that people can do, and when it not even an example of like if the state fails,
right.
But the practicality is that in the people's hands, you can do a lot for your own community that's right there, without wondering how is some higher authority going to take care of that. And furthermore, that psychological ideal of like always falling back on the idea, what's the authority, what's the teacher, what's the parent in the room think about it, instead of us thinking that we're adult citizens that can work together.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is it's, taking direct action in your community to make things happen, without, needing somebody to guide you along the way. But what happens a lot of times is that anytime you go out there to, for instance, say there's an empty lot in your neighborhood, right? That's just decrepit, and it's a magnet for crime and this kind of thing. Crack. Prostitutes hang out there.
Absolutely.
But say you're sick and tired of it, and so you go over there and you clean out the filth, and you plow the land, and you plant some fucking
flowers
or
and make a jungle gym or something. Yeah.
But you can't do that, of course, because the minute that you begin acting on this land, you're going to find yourself caught up in a web of property rights and a web of regulations, and you're going to have to pay for permits. Right. And so, the idea of being able to do things ourselves is fantastic, but the reality of it is that we live, and we hear it over and over again, we live in a nanny state. That there's ways of capturing people as they act, to bring them into the fold. And a lot of times it kills action because nobody likes dealing with bureaucrats to begin with. Yeah, nobody likes filling out forms, and nobody likes the kind of
paperwork was created to keep things from happening.
Exactly. Right. It's exactly what it was. You're absolutely right about that. Yeah.
So you need to fill out this form? No, thank you.
Keeping things from happening is really the function of government, because nothing's more frightening than something happening.
Yeah.
I mean, America is a testament to nothing really happening. I think. Yeah. I've been to the suburbs, so nothing happens there. Nothing.
Well, stability is blasé, right? I mean, that's I love the suburbs. Worst place to go.
No.
I hate the suburbs.
Very dynamic.
So much. Best place to go, man.
Yeah.
When you really need somewhere to go. Right. You'll catch me on different days saying both of those statements and totally believing them.
Yeah.
But you also bring up the wider conversation. Hopefully, we can have on another day. Is pragmatism and what's going on in the world, the population and toxins in the rivers and all this, and at the same time we have 300 something million Americans like growing lawns and like watering like little blades of grass, and it's like grow some fucking food and like count. Scientifically even it seems like there's a better way that we can do things. Yeah. And now it's just kind of like always, like you're saying, that mess, that spider web you get caught in of all the litany and all the paperwork and everything.
Well, I think back to Greece, what we've seen in Athens is, able-bodied young people or able-bodied anybody who's able to leave the city have left.
Yeah.
They've bought land in the countryside. They've gone out there. They've begun growing their own food. They've begun, using less electricity, doing these kind of things because, it's been forced upon them. I mean, Athens is not you ever see pictures of Athens in the summertime? I mean, it is
I've been there in the summertime.
Hot,
it's
concrete, dusty,
stony.
Yeah, it's not. Nowadays it's dangerous.
Is that also covered with garbage and crime?
Because it's covered exactly, exactly. And so you see people leaving, and you see people, not going to the suburbs, but going out, learning how to live, differently, and learning how to live like their grandparents did, that kind of thing. But developing the skills that are necessary. I mean, quite frankly, I'm sure we've all done the thought experiment where, if it all fails tomorrow, which one of us knows how to grow the corn? Not me.
I've mapped out the route I'm going to walk out of New York City
with
when
the zombie
everything
apocalypse.
burns down. Yeah, exactly.
I'm just going to start eating bugs.
I'm the one with the gun.
There you go. Call Blaine. He's got a gun. We can
You're the
eat
one
him.
that wins in the end.
I'll figure out which one can grow corn. And you're covered.
Pretty quickly too, by the way. May I add. But within 7 or 8 feet under the earth, bam, right there we have everything we need to eat. Right here in Brooklyn, you got these really nice, delicious long earthworms, and it's not necessarily polluted. It's good.
Well, there's countless cans of cat food out there for
Right.
the really hard times.
Right.
Yeah. We don't want to joke about that, though.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so close after that segment, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and of course, right here in America, not to mention globally, and the destitution in the world, we have people, our neighbors right here in Brooklyn, that are eating cat food right now.
Exactly.
I read an article recently that said something about, inside Brooklyn, something like 60-something, and this is wrong, but 60-something% of the population lives below the poverty line, which is considered, $30,000 per year for a family of 4.
Right.
So that's 30 grand, family of 4. Most of Brooklyn is living on that.
Right.
That's something that we don't all think about.
And that's in comparison to what's happening in other countries like Greece and across the ocean. Not that bad.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's another
dealing
thing
with
you start
something
seeing.
that is terrible,
Mhm.
and it's still good.
Yeah.
Compared to what's happening in other places.
You know, funny thing though, you see there's an ideology behind this austerity that is not just a matter of getting paid back from Greece, right? It's not, this austerity ideology has, is rooted here in the States as well. I mean, there was just a bill passed, this last week that slashed food aid to United States citizens, and I hope that you guys have never had to apply for food stamps, but
I know people who have had to though.
Once you get into that process, though, you realize that to get food aid, you have to be really destitute. And
Yes.
it's
and there are a
unfortunate
lot
that,
of forms you need to fill out,
of
and there's
forms.
a lot of steps that you must follow,
and you
and
have to
it's
show
very
your face.
dehumanizing.
Yeah,
You're very much taken away from your own facilities as someone who can do something, and you're
Right.
basically treated like a subclass person.
well,
Yeah,
and
and-
it's you're treated as a subclass in our political conversation as well. I mean, we have a whole party that's dedicated to slashing aid to the welfare, slashing social welfare.
Cut them loose.
Cut them loose.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the same groups of people that sit and badger the system because they've seen somebody using food stamps to order a fancy Domino's pizza, right?
Right.
And they should be out there eating like the leftover
welfare,
sausages
the welfare
or something.
queen with the Cadillac.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I think that was a Reagan thing.
It's like, get a grip. I challenge everybody that might be tuning into us to go actually look up online and see what the welfare statistics are and see how much of your money goes toward supporting of the war versus how much welfare is out there and how much of each cent of your tax dollar does go in to help somebody in some poor family below the poverty line
Well,
get food.
maybe
It's not much.
Since we are talking about, and this is a little bit of a left turn, but the jury, the Trayvon Martin jury, went out today, and so maybe since we're talking about current events, we should at least take note that this is going to be it's going to be a heavy verdict one way or another, and there's going to be a lot of emotions on both sides. So just keep an eye out for that.
Can you give us the quick backstory of that, just for anybody that might be listening that's not clued into what's happening here?
Well, I'll try to keep it even. There was an unfortunate incident in Florida last year where an armed neighborhood security guy, although he wasn't actually on duty at that point in time,
Not an
also
official
not an-
agent of the state.
not in any official capacity, he was armed.
He was an off-duty
legally.
neighborhood watchman.
He was an off-duty neighborhood watchman who was, I think the story was that he was driving through this neighborhood on his way to shoot target practice. And that's why he had his pistol. And he sees Trayvon Martin, who's a 17-year-old black kid, walking through the neighborhood. He has his hoodie on. He's got his hood up. It's raining outside. He's got a packet of Skittles and a Pepsi or something like this. And he had popped out because it was halftime of the All-Star game, the NBA All-Star game. So we know that he's walking down the street with the Skittles in one hand, and he's talking on the phone with his friend. And he notices, George Zimmerman, the off-duty neighborhood watch guy, sees Trayvon Martin and decides that he's, suspicious, and there had been some robberies in the neighborhood, and decides that he's going to take it upon himself to follow him and eventually confront him. And the confrontation between Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman ended with Trayvon Martin shot once to the heart, dead. And, initially George Zimmerman wasn't arrested. Florida's got what they call stand your ground laws, which say that, if you believe that your life is in some reasonable danger, you have the right to shoot to kill. And George Zimmerman's story all along was that he indeed, confronted Trayvon Martin, and we have the 911 calls that he made to dispatch saying that, he was following this kid and this kind of thing. But George Zimmerman's story is that when he confronted Trayvon turned on him and, beat the shit out of him. Trayvon is a 17-year-old kid. He was, 150, 160 pounds. George Zimmerman is 33 years old, I think. and he was armed, and he was the actor in this play. He was the one that instigated the confrontation in the first place, and he was ostensibly trained in jiu-jitsu. And so how Trayvon Martin got George Zimmerman to the ground and was, as George Zimmerman describes it, pounding his head into the pavement, we'll never know. I think we all know that George Zimmerman is just a big pussy. But I shouldn't say that, I guess.
That's for the jury to decide.
We all may believe
I think whether he's guilty of this crime or not,
That's not one of the charges?
He got his ass handed to him by a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah, that is an important thing to point out. If that's what he wants to say,
that's his
an
story.
Important
That's
point
his story.
to point out.
It's also the perfect dodge for the same crime that's been committed 10,000 times here in America
Absolutely.
Since we were founded.
Right.
And something else that needs to be noted. I mean, you can get on YouTube, you can get online and find the stories that, we see certain percentage of stories of that kind of police brutality, but the police brutality that the black community suffers is intense. And here in New York, the things that I've seen, the stories since I've lived here, have been completely crazy. And it's another thing that people don't realize that happens so much as it does. And now that we're seeing a gripping and a tightening of the police state, which brings me to another thing is like, this is the whole thing, right? Now that we see the wrenching getting a little bit tighter, those that have traditionally been comfortable in their middle-class lives or rich lives.
Now it's epidemic.
Now they're waking up and saying, oh, I'm a little bit threatened here. Right. And yet at the same time, we have these oppressed communities, the black community, all these different communities are like, look, we have our own history. Yeah. And we'll honestly sit here and tell you our own history because we've seen how it's been different from outside of that illusion. And now we're dealing with the globalist state, and we're maybe on the cusp of a real, reckoning of truth in the world, or a great battle, or
I feel like it's
all the above. I feel like we can't expect any one thing to happen. I think we always have this idea that everything's going to culminate, everything's going to come to a head, and one particular event's going to happen. I think it's going to be a lot more just different things, changes that are just more vague and confusing and difficult to handle.
The police state through paperwork and
you figure the 1% would throw us a bone in some respect, because it usually ends in beheadings, right? They might want to pick up a history book and see what happens. Cut to the end, see, oops, hey, let's just throw them a bone.
Yeah, but we have new technologies now. Maybe they won't be able to get to us in our fenced communities. And
probably it.
Wait, we're going down a dark corner here, aren't we?
Text messaging though. But I think that's an important point.
The satiation and being too busy to pay attention to what's going on in the world because everything's entertainment.
I think something very important that we're trying to put together here is something, a meaningful bit of thought to put out into the blogosphere, just the ridiculous mass of stuff that's happening right now.
Well, actually, I think this is a ridiculous mass of thought, actually. I think there is some value in it, though. We may be adding to the noise on a whole, but there's definitely some nuggets. We're providing some
hopefully
nuggets.
At one point, one day, we'll get to a point where we can put the thought together and it'll be meaningful to a few people.
Yeah, and it is. And there's all different kinds of levels, right? And that's one thing that we shoot to do is to be like, hey, here's an honest exposure of who we are and what we want as far as news sources and what we think is cool as art and what we think is original as music. And, mainstream, whether it's mainstream news or mainstream culture and news and art, music and art, wants you to think that, here's the great ruler that everything is set to. Yeah. And, it's independent and it's alternative if you've gone under our ruler. But we're kind of at the same time saying kind of a big, honest, very sincere, and friend to friend, fuck you to the mainstream that wants to say that we're the ones that control the magnet that controls how everything should be viewed by the people. Right. And now, guess what? We have the internet, and we got 4 microphones and a lot of cool friends. And so that's our approach, is to try to say we don't have to be mainstream to find good information about what's going on in the world. Really great artists, photographers, musicians, sculptors, and to have really great discussions without an advertisement.
You're taking over the world.
Right. And I think just dropping the ads and in the future, if we can get some funding and keep getting bigger, we know we'll have to face that someday, right? Yeah. But I think it's a very something. Chomsky is always a big inspiration to me, and one of his things is how you can have a political conversation on TV between 2 ads, and you can't go over 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Or, what's that all about? So you start getting into a conversation, and then as soon as you start getting to something, then it has to end, and then you show people a Colgate commercial, and people get that, McLuhan-esque, like, oh, my teeth aren't clean enough. Or, and it just wipes the slate of what serious conversation we could have gotten to. So that's another thing we're actually hoping to do in this, is be politically progressive in information and media.
Yeah.
So and at the same time share really great art with everybody. So.
Well, I think you guys are doing a great job so far.
Cool.
Well,
you may have to vary your guest. I don't want to be wearing out your audience. So.
So you're not cool for next week too?
Oh no, I have nothing else to do on a Friday night. I'd love to be here.
Cool. We need a correspondence section where you just put a little bubble up here on a green screen that's just like live from Greenpoint.
Exactly.
Not to add to the
exotic
to the
locales.
length of this particular segment, I do want to come back to one thing we were just talking about. We want to put forward this honest bit of information that we have gathered sources that have researched and gotten their facts together. But it can't just be a group of people, four people at a time doing this. Really, more people have to do this. It has to. I would like to inspire other people to do the same thing that we're doing right now.
And there could be these like little communities, dare I say, call themselves of media information.
Because it's great, if we're talking to people out there and they're hearing us and they're getting something from us, that's fantastic. But even if nobody's out there, we're here, we're talking.
That's
we're
what it's to me. Yeah,
among ourselves.
Yeah, I'm learning and we're documenting it. We're making it concrete. And just like all the many jams we've had with our friend musicians and poets and different people in here, we're recording it all now, and it's all going to be archived. And so it's kind of like something to do with legacy. Like we're pinning it down now, and just for ourselves, we're going to make it concrete. And we can share with other people online, and if other people enjoy it, that's really awesome.
Making it a point to put it out there in the public sphere is important, though.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah, Chris, thank you so much, man, for joining us again for this one. This is really great. Chris Haddix, ladies and gentlemen. I also want to encourage everybody to go to www.mantlethought.org. I've since meeting these guys, I've read maybe 5 or 6 of the articles on there, and I've loved all of them. Really informative, cool.
Thanks, guys.
Source. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Have a good night.
Mantlethought.org. If you go to .com, you'll get there anyway. So don't worry if you forget that last part.
You just took the long way.
Yeah. Exactly. That was a good segment.